What's up, everybody? Welcome to Heresy Financial. My name is Joe Brown, and recently we've started to see some headlines about how the tax returns for Donald Trump have been leaked, and he's got tons of debt, tons of losses, and he only paid $750 in federal income tax. So I thought it would be a good reminder to point out and to explain in a video on taxes. Number one, taxation is theft. Number two, it's actually illegal. Number three, the most patriotic thing that you can do is pay as little as possible in taxes. And number four, the rules and loopholes, so-called loopholes that allow billionaires and millionaires to pay zero or little in taxes are actually not loopholes. They're rules, and they are rules that are available to literally everybody. In fact, it's the entire tax code that is designed to give you as many ways as possible as you can to reduce your tax liability. Ready? Let's dive in. All right, before we start, I've got to hawk some merch on you because my taxation is theft shirt is it's in the shelf below the video. I've got my merchandise down there below every video. You can go there to get any of my merchandise there. So got this new one in recently, taxation is theft. If you like the video, like the content, you want to spread the good news, go ahead and pick one of these up. Second, most of what I'm going to be talking about in this video is summarized really well in this book called Tax-Free Wealth. And this is by Tom Wheelwright. It's also linked in the description below, but this is one of the most concise and succinct books on using the tax code like it was designed, which is to your advantage. And there's lots of really great information in this book that we're not covering in this video today. And so today we're looking at how the tax code is designed really to give you as many options as possible to reduce your tax liability and why that's a good thing for you to do. Let's start off with a little thought experiment. Number one, let's say you're in the camp that says the government by and large is made up of people that we've elected, and they are doing their best to push our country or lead our country in a way that that they think will be best for our country. Now, our leaders might usually disagree on the proper steps to get there, but in general, the country as a whole has elected these people. They've made the rules, they've made the laws, they dictate the tax code, and so in general, our leaders are trying to move us in a way that is going to be beneficial for our country. And if you are in that camp, then your mindset must be logically that it is patriotic to follow in their footsteps, to kind of follow their lead. Now, it is essential to understand that the tax code is basically the financial rules of the game. It's the United States government saying, here are the rules financially in our country. And it's made up of two basic rules. It's made up of one set of rules that says, if you do these things, we're going to take money from you. And if you do these things, we're going to give you some of that money back or even give you extra money back. That's it. Those are the two categories of the things that are in the Internal Revenue Code. So you, as a believer in our elected officials, whether or not you agree with all of them or just some of them, doesn't matter. You are looking at this and thinking, hey, they've set the rules, so it is patriotic for me to play by the rules of the game. And the rules of the game are, do this, we'll take money from you. Do this, we'll give money back. That's it. And from an incentive standpoint, that means that our leaders are saying, we want you to not do these things and we want you to do these things. So all of the deductions and all the credits that are written into the Internal Revenue Code are things that they're incentives to get people in our country to do certain things. Our elected officials want affordable housing, and so there are deductions and credits given to landlords and businesses who provide affordable housing. On the other hand, they don't want people smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol because of the negative health effects, and so they tax those things heavily to make it more difficult for people to do those things. Our elected officials believe that it's beneficial for our country if people are homeowners, and so they provide tax incentives for people who buy a home, especially for people who can't afford to buy a home with cash, because then you get the deduction on the mortgage interest. So this is the entire tax code. It's the government saying we believe that these things are not beneficial for members of our country to take part in. And so we're going to disincentivize those by charging you extra money to do those things. And we believe it's very beneficial for people to do these things. So if anybody does these things, we're going to give you money back. That's it. And so it's patriotic for you to do the things where the government gives you money back, because it's our elected officials saying that, hey, these things are the things that are good for our country. We want to incentivize these things. Now, let's say you've listened to this whole thing and you think, no, that's hogwash. None of our elected officials have our best interests at heart. They're all scum. You know, the root words for politician is poly and tick, poly meaning many and tick meaning blood-sucking parasite. So if you have that view of our government and our politicians where it's like nothing they do is responsible, everything they do is corrupt, then do you really want to give them more of your hard-earned money? They've given you a way out. They've designed an entire tax code that says if you do X, Y, and Z, you don't have to give us as much money, or we'll give you some of that money back. So if you have a complete distrust in our government, then still, the most patriotic thing for you to do is to give the government as little money as possible. So whether you're an Uncle Sam fanboy or whether you're an anarchist and you think we should overthrow the system, either way, it's the most patriotic thing and the most moral thing to do, philosophically speaking, to treat taxation as theft and to say, I'm going to do as much as possible to pay as little as possible in taxes. And the final nail in the coffin on this front is that if you believe that it's good for what the government is spending their money on, if you believe those things are good, you know, taking care of the poor, taking care of the elderly, taking care of the needy, taking care of people who are sick, I'm pretty sure with just a couple minutes spent on Google, you can find a few charities or nonprofit organizations that are doing that work at least a little bit better than the government is. And with your tax savings, without using the government as the middleman, if you still believe in those things, you can direct your dollars directly at those causes. And instead of Uncle Sam taking his cut off that money and trying to accomplish the same purpose, you can accomplish those purposes you believe in directly more effectively. Okay, then the second thing that I said, I don't know if I'm doing this in order, but the second thing I said in the intro is that taxation is theft. And that's because constitutionally speaking, it is actually illegal for the federal government to levy an income tax. There are other taxes that the federal government is allowed to do, but not a federal income tax. And this has actually gone through the Supreme Court a couple of times. Peter Schiff talks about this a lot. His dad actually died in prison because he went in battle against the federal government, saying, hey, it's illegal to charge an income tax. And he was right, but he lost because the federal government will never admit, hey, just because something's unconstitutional or illegal doesn't mean the federal government's going to not enforce doing something, right? We have plenty of examples of the government doing illegal things. Just one of the more recent things is the Edward Snowden, where he leaked all the classified information from the NSA because they were doing all the data gathering on people. And just recently, within the last month or two, it was ruled that the government was actually breaking the law that entire time. So just because something's illegal or unconstitutional doesn't mean the government won't do it. And so just because federal income tax is technically illegal from a constitutional standpoint doesn't mean they're not going to enforce actually collecting an income tax or put you in jail for not paying it. So I'm not advocating here just stopping to pay your income tax. I am advocating learn the tax code and abide by the actual laws, because you can still get away with not paying taxes in a legal way instead of just saying, okay, I'm going to commit tax fraud. But this has gone to the Supreme Court a couple of times, especially because the word income is not actually defined in the Internal Revenue Code. And so there's an income tax, but they never define what income is. And every time I believe it's been 3 times that this issue has gone to the Supreme Court, they've defined income as business profits. So as far as the Supreme Court is concerned, the IRS is charging a tax on something that it's not allowed to tax, because income is not wages, income is business profits. Add on to the fact that they have the power to seize assets, to garnish wages, and to just violate a bunch of the other things that the Constitution says are supposed to be protected rights. From a legal perspective, constitutionally speaking, taxation is theft. This book called The Federal Mafia is written by Erwin Schiff. This is Peter Schiff's dad, who, again, like I said earlier, he died in prison for just stopping paying his taxes and losing that fight against the federal government. But this is a good book as well that details more of what I've just been going into about how the federal income tax is actually illegal. Personally, I wouldn't use Erwin Schiff's guide as a resource on how to not pay taxes. I would use this guide called Tax-Free Wealth on how to not pay taxes, because it uses the rules built into the Internal Revenue Code and uses the incentives that the government is providing us, saying, hey, we want you to do these things, and for that, we'll give you money back. And finally, like I said, these rules are available to everybody. They're not reserved for the rich. They're not reserved for millionaires, billionaires. They're not reserved for politicians. The Internal Revenue Code is available for anybody to take advantage of. The entire thing is just different ways, basically, on how you can pay less in taxes. I think the biggest one that most people miss is being an employee versus running a business. Now, as an employee, you earn money. Let's say you earn $100,000. The federal government comes in and says, hey, you earned $100,000. I'm going to take my cut off the top for federal income tax, and then some of the other things that I like to take money out for, and you're left with $50,000 afterwards. And then you, as an employee, can take that $50,000 and you're allowed to then go spend it. You can pay your mortgage or your rent, you can go buy a car, you can buy your groceries, and you're allowed to do whatever you want with what's left over. So that's a pretty raw deal. You basically are working half of every single day just to pay the government what they want to take from you. Now, on the other hand, businesses are not treated that way from a tax perspective. Let's say you run a small business and you have, as a business, you've got, let's say, let's just use the same number, $100,000 of income coming into your business for that year. But let's say the business has expenses. It's got to pay its, the rent for the office or the mortgage for the building. It's got to pay the utilities. It's got to pay the vendors. It's got to pay for the raw materials or the wholesale prices for the products that it's selling at retail. So it's got expenses. And let's say it's got $50,000 worth of expenses. So it's got $50,000 of leftover profits. Now, at this point is when the government steps in and says, you've got $50,000 worth of profits. Now we're going to step in and we're going to tax you as a business on that leftover $50,000. And let's say through various taxes, they take half of that. That means they took $25,000. So the business earned $100,000 in gross income. The individual who was an employee earned $100,000 in gross income. The employee paid Uncle Sam $50,000 and then got to spend what was left over. The business got to spend as much as it needed and then paid out of what was left over. So you can see the power in this. Businesses are incentivized to spend as much money as possible because, just like I said earlier, that's what the Internal Revenue Code is designed for. It's designed to incentivize or disincentivize actions. And so businesses are incentivized to spend as much money as possible because the government believes spending is what's going to stimulate the economy. We want businesses to spend as much as possible. So if the business spends $90,000 of that $100,000 that it brings in, it's only going to pay taxes on the leftover $10,000. It doesn't pay taxes on the full $100,000 like an employee does. So very clearly, this is probably one of the most powerful changes that any individual can make in their life, is moving your life from being an employee to running a business, even if it's a small one. Because in general, businesses provide value far more than individual employees can. Businesses spend a lot more than employees do. Businesses provide jobs, employees don't. In fact, every part of value that employees provide is really just under the umbrella of the value that the business is providing. So despite the fact that the federal government is legally, by the Constitution, not allowed to tax your income, doesn't matter, they do. So instead of fighting in the way that's going to land you dying in prison, fight in the way that they allow you to. They say, hey, if you don't want to pay taxes, you don't have to. These rules are available for everybody, not just Trump, not just politicians, not just Jeff Bezos. So start taking advantage of them. Number one, if you want to win the game, you have to know the rules of the game. And the tax code is the financial rules of the game in whatever country you're in. So level up, start to read the tax code, start to read books on it, start to understand the ways that the government provides to say, hey, if you want to pay less in taxes, if you want us to give you some of this money back, start doing the things that are built into the system on how you can take advantage of this. And again, a few extra resources that are good on this are right here. They're linked in the description below. And if you want to spread the good news, pick up one of these Taxation is Theft shirts in the merch shelf below. As always, really appreciate you guys. You're the best. Have a good day.